Snow here doesn't just fall. It settles, like ash, like soot. I remember killing the engine. The old Ford coughed a couple of times and went silent, as if it had resigned itself to the inevitable. Around me, not a soul, just this building, St. Agatha's Asylum. It doesn't sit on the hill. It grows out of it like a tumor. Gray concrete, blind windows like the eye sockets of a skull that has leaked its brains out. The ad said, night watchman needed, experience irrelevant, ability to remain silent is key, high pay, housing provided. I laughed then. The ability to remain silent is the only thing I had left. After the wife left, after the money ran out, after I started hearing them in the silence of my apartment. I grabbed the flashlight and a set of keys. The keys were heavy, cold, as if cast from ice. On the keychain dangled a tag, main entrance, do not open until dawn. Irony, dawn never came here. The sky was the color of a hematoma, purple-black with streaks of sickly yellow light somewhere on a horizon I couldn't see. I approached the doors. They were massive, oak, iron-banded. A draft pulled through the gap between the leaves. But it wasn't just cold air. It was a smell. The smell of formaldehyde, old paper, and something sweet. The smell of rotting apples in a cellar. The key turned with difficulty, grating like a groan. The door opened. I was hit by silence. Not the kind where there are no sounds, but the kind where sounds are afraid to be born. I walked into the lobby. My boots squeaked on the tile, covered in a thin layer of dust. The dust lay there as if the building hadn't been opened in 100 years. Yet according to the logs I was given, Mike had been working here. Mike, who vanished 3 days ago. "Mike!" I shouted, my voice drowned in the high vaults. No one answered. Only somewhere above, under the ceiling, a bird flapped its wings, or a bat. I found the security post. It was a glass booth in the center of the lobby. Inside, a desk, a chair, CCTV monitors, and an old radio. I sat down. The leather of the chair was cracked, cold. I turned on the monitors. Grainy image, black and white static. The cameras showed empty corridors, long, endless corridors receding into a perspective that felt wrong. The angles didn't converge as they should. On one monitor, in the pediatric ward sector, something flickered. A shadow, quick and jerky. I switched the camera. Empty, just a rocking horse in the center of the room. It was moving, back and forth, back and forth. There was no draft in the room. I checked the vents. They were off.
Don't go there. Cold.
I reached for the radio. "Mike, this is Ryan. I'm at the post. Over." Silence. Then a sound like bones breaking. A crunch. Wet, vile crunch. I turned off the radio. My hands were shaking. I took a swig from my flask. The whiskey burned my throat, but didn't warm me. The cold came from inside. 2 hours passed, or 2 years. Time here flowed thick, like tar. I decided to do a perimeter check. The rules stated, check locks every hour. Do not enter the basement without special permission. I didn't have permission for the basement, but I had a master key. I walked down the second-floor corridor. The walls were covered in wallpaper with a pale green floral pattern. The flowers looked predatory. Their petals resembled teeth. In places, the wallpaper had peeled off, revealing plaster that looked like skin. I ran my hand along the wall. It was warm, pulsating. I stopped at a door marked Playroom. It was ajar. A smell of baby powder and urine drifted from the crack. I pushed the door open with my flashlight. The room was huge. Toys were scattered chaotically, but there was an order to the chaos. Dolls sat in a circle. Wooden soldiers stood in formation, pointing their rifles at the center of the circle. In the center, on the rug, lay a drawing. I approached, shining the light on it. It wasn't a child's drawing. It was a schematic, a blueprint of the building, but with markings. In red chalk or blood, the ventilation shafts were circled, and a caption, "They breathe here." I picked up the drawing. The paper was fresh, white, not yellowed. And then I heard it. Ding, ding, ding. A music box. The melody was distorted, slowed down. Pop goes the weasel, but it sounded like it was being played underwater. I shined the light on the carousel in the corner. It was spinning, slowly, creaking. On the carousel sat a doll, porcelain with a crack on its face. I stepped closer. The doll wasn't a toy. It was a head, a real miniature human head attached to a porcelain body. The doll's eyes blinked. I recoiled, tripping over a block. I fell. The flashlight rolled across the floor, its beam catching pieces of nightmare. An overturned chair, a puddle of dark liquid that wasn't blood. It glowed with a phosphorescent green. I scrambled up and ran. I ran down the corridor, blindly. Doors flashed by. Room 201, room 202. The door to 203 was open. Heat radiated from it. Not warmth, but heat, like from a furnace. I stopped. Curiosity is a vice that kills cats and watchmen. I looked inside. In the middle of the room stood a bed. On it lay a skeleton. But not just a skeleton. It was propped up with pillows, covered by a blanket. Beside it stood a tray of food, rotten fruit, stale bread. On the nightstand stood a framed photograph. I entered, feeling the air grow thick, hard to inhale. I took the photo. It was a group of doctors and nurses. They were smiling, and behind their backs, in the shadows, stood children. Dozens of children. Their faces were blurred, as if in motion. But one face was clear, a boy in the front row. My breath caught. It was me. Not my father, not my grandfather, me, at the age of 7, in a hospital gown. I spun around. The door was closed. I was alone in the room with the corpse in my childhood photo. "This can't be," I whispered. "I've never been here. I grew up in Chicago." But memory's a tricky thing. It's like an old house with boarded up rooms. Sometimes the doors open on their own. I remembered the smell of burning flesh, the smell that had haunted my nightmares for the last 20 years. I thought it was phantom pain from a burn I never had on my arm. I looked in my right hand. Under the shirt sleeve, the skin was red. It was burning. I had to get out. I pounded on the door with my fists until my knuckles bled. The door wouldn't budge. Then I noticed the ventilation grate in the wall. It was loose. Someone had loosened it. I pried it open and crawled inside. The shaft was narrow, claustrophobic. I crawled forward, the metal scraping my back.
After what felt like an eternity, I dropped down into a room. I shone my flashlight around. I was in the basement archives. Shelves lined the walls, filled with dusty files. I found a folder labeled Incident 1974. Inside were photos, black and white, grainy. On them, children, dozens of children in hospital gowns. They stood in a circle. In the center of the circle stood a man in an orderly's uniform. He held a canister in his hands. I looked closer at the orderly's face. My breath hitched. It was me. Not my father, not my grandfather. It was me. The same scar above the eyebrow, the same mole on the neck, only younger. There was no date on the photo, but the paper was yellowed as if it were 100 years old. "Impossible," I whispered. My voice sounded alien, scratchy.
"Possible, Ryan,"
a voice answered from the darkness. I spun around, shining the light. At the end of the corridor, in the light of a single surviving bulb, stood a girl, about 7 years old, in a white dress that seemed to glow in the dark. "Who are you?" I asked, raising the flashlight. The beam passed through her. She was translucent, a ghost. "I am the one you forgot," she said. Her voice sounded like the rustle of dry leaves. "We are all here. We waited." She smiled. She had no eyes, only black voids from which smoke seeped. I backed away, my legs tangled. I fell, hitting my knee on the concrete. The pain was sharp, real. It calmed me. This is a dream, I thought. Just a nightmare. I'm sleeping in my apartment. I just had too much whiskey. I got up, ran back to the ladder, but the ladder was gone. In its place was a wall, a smooth concrete wall. I pounded on it with my fists until my knuckles broke. Blood dripped onto the floor, and I watched in horror as it didn't spread. It soaked into the concrete like water into a sponge. The building was drinking me. The smell of ash hit my nose with such force it made me retch. Real fire, not a hallucination. I saw tongues of flame licking the ceiling. They were blue, cold fire. I ran through corridors that changed before my eyes. The walls melted, revealing charred boards underneath. The floor grew hot under my feet. I saw shadows, dozens of shadows running alongside me. They didn't cast shadows, they were the shadows. I burst into the operating room. In the center of the room stood an operating table. A body lay on it, covered by a sheet. I pulled the sheet. It was me. My face was black with soot, my mouth open in a silent scream. A hole gaped in my chest. I screamed. It wasn't a human scream, it was the squeal of the wounded animal. "Who am I?" I shouted into the void. "Who the hell am I?" And then the memory returned. Not as a memory, but as a hammer blow to the head. I am not Ryan, the watchman. I am Ryan, the orderly. 1974. The fire. I didn't save them. I locked the door. I locked them in the basement because they were dangerous, because they were screaming, because I was afraid of being punished for dropping the kerosene canister. I heard their screams. I heard them pounding on the door. And then, silence. I ran. I lived with this for 50 years. I drank to forget. I used drugs to not see their faces in my dreams. And when I died of an overdose in a dirty alley, I thought it was the end. But hell doesn't wait for death. Hell is the place where you are forced to eternally relive your worst act. I opened my eyes. I was sitting in the security booth again. The clock read 3:33. Snow was falling outside, and the radio was silent. I looked at my hands. They were clean. No blood, no soot. I smiled. I felt a strange calm. The booth door opened. Mike walked in, my predecessor. He looked tired. "Well, kid," he said, handing me a set of keys, "my shift is over. Now you're the prisoner. The shift will never end."
I look at my hands. The skin is charred. The eyes are two embers. The mouth is sewn shut with black thread. "Welcome home, Chief of the Shift," the figure says with my voice. "The shift never ends because you are the fuel."